device that was detonated on a tube. It's not isolated incidents, and just one case of prevent failing is one too many. And we need to hold people accountable. We need answers.
At least 76 people have been killed in a fire at a skiing resort in the Karaglu Mountains in Turkey. Reports suggest some people tried to climb from their rooms by tying blankets together. Leading figures who stormed the US Capitol building 4 years ago when Donald Trump left office have been released from prison. They include the former leader of the Proud Boys and the founder of Oath Keepers, both far-right groups. And almost all of the UK is now covered by yellow warnings for wind for later this week. Winds of at least 90 miles per hour are expected this weekend. In the city, the FTSE 100 has closed up 27 points at 85.48. The pound buys $1.23 and €1.18. LBC weather, patchy rain for central England and Wales tonight. Drier elsewhere with some showers in the northwest and a low of -2. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Daryl Jackson.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. Cross Question with Iain Dale.
Hello, a very good evening to you. It's Cross Question on Tuesday. It's 8 o'clock on LBC. I'm Iain Dale. It's always nice right at the beginning of the programme to have lots of calls coming in, and they're not all about Donald Trump. You can call in about anything you like to ask our panel. On the panel tonight, to my left, Anna Firth, former Conservative MP for Southend West. She succeeded, of course, Sir David Amess, whose daughter we talked to earlier in the programme. To her left is Adrian Ramsay, co-leader of the Green Party of England and Wales and MP for Waveney Valley. To my right, Angela Epstein, journalist and broadcaster, and to her right, Richard Power-Sayeed, political commentator and former Labour Party official. So the number to call, 0345 6060 973. You can WhatsApp us on that number, and of course you can watch the whole hour on Global Player.
Call 0345 6060 973. Tweet at LBC. Text 84850. Cross Question with Iain Dale. This is LBC.
One thing I don't mention often enough is that if you miss an episode of Cross Question, there's a Cross Question podcast, which is always uploaded about an hour after the programme. And I know a lot of people listen to it on their 5 a.m. dog walk. So should you have one of those, it becomes quite a cult, actually. Right, let's go to our first question. It's Stephen in East Grinstead. Hello, Stephen.
Hi, good evening, Iain. Good evening, panel. Elon Musk and his fan club defend his blatant and clear use of Nazi salutes broadcast to the American people and the rest of the world.
So you're saying, can Elon Musk defend it, or can any of our panel defend it? Or
can
both?
Elon Musk defend his use of the Nazi salute?
OK. Well, he has been defending it today, hasn't he? Adrian Ramsay.
Well, we live in very worrying times in terms of the direction that US politics has taken, and the direction that, of course, some dark forces want to take the UK political system in. Whether or not it was a Nazi salute will be interpreted differently by different people depending on where they stand in the political spectrum. But the reason why people worry about the intention behind it is because Musk's politics are very clear and are dragging US politics and indeed seeking to drag global politics in a very worrying direction indeed.
Now, someone needs to switch their phone off.
Don't think it's me. The fact that he's not only provided, huge funding and undue influence in a US election that will have a huge impact on the future of the world, on issues from an inclusive society, spreading of hate and disinformation, whether it's the rolling back of the climate agreements that President Trump has already been embarking upon. But the fact that he's now also seeking to influence UK politics, supporting Tommy Robinson, spreading disinformation about the UK government and about Southport, it's deeply, deeply worrying. And for all of us who want to safeguard democracy, who want to stand up for a future where we are tackling divisions in society rather than deliberately sowing hatred, which Musk is undoubtedly doing, this is a worrying time, and global leaders have got to stand up to Musk and to Trump.
But do you think it was a Nazi salute, a deliberate Nazi salute?
But I honestly don't know. And I think that we could spend the whole hour speculating on that, couldn't we? But I think that...
Well, we'll spend the first few minutes.
But I think the more important thing, what we do know is that his wider views are deeply, deeply worrying and have had a huge impact already on US politics.
Okay.
And he's looking to buy up our democracy as well, threatening to do so by investing in forces in UK politics who want to try to exploit understandable divisions from people who've been let down by decades of decline of public services,
Rich
low
people
wages.
donating money in politics is nothing new. I mean, I don't know if Dale Vince donates to the Green Party. He certainly donated to the Labour Party. But if he offered you $5 million, I doubt whether you'd turn it down.
Well, it would go through the same ethical scrutiny policies as everybody else. But no, we haven't had a donation recently from Dale Vince, as far as I know. That's not the point. The point
just putting the idea in his head.
Well, that's...
Call me, Dale.
I'll wait for your commission request later. The point is, the levels of funding that people like Elon Musk could put in could literally seek to buy a future election in a country like the UK, and that's what's deeply worrying. And we do need stronger regulation of these oligarchs seeking to influence the future of our politics.
Does he qualify as an oligarch? He's a very successful businessman. I'm not sure that qualifies as an oligarch, but that's probably another debate to have. Anna Firth, Nazi salute or not?
Well, I didn't think it was a Nazi salute. I'm probably in a minority on this panel, but I watched it this morning, and he said, my heart goes out to you, and I genuinely didn't see that as a Nazi salute.
For those who aren't watching on Global Player, Anna basically just did an Elon Musk, so you're as bad as him, Anna.
But I certainly didn't do a Nazi salute, I can assure you.
Oh, it looked like one to me.
Now you're being very naughty, and in the programme's only just begun. But the point here is that no one he's the only one who can answer that question. Now, if it was not a Nazi salute, then there's nothing wrong with the gesture. If he genuinely was seeking to do a Nazi salute at the presidential inauguration, then that is completely unacceptable and frankly deeply worrying and totally it's unacceptable full stop. But when we're sort of 2 days or a few days before Holocaust Memorial Day, which I think is coming up on Monday,
the 27th.
Yeah.
Totally and utterly unacceptable.
Let me tell you, boy, do we have an interview to play out there. And I've recorded it this afternoon with a Holocaust survivor. Honestly,
Ian,
I didn't speak for 20 minutes.
But Ian, you've got to ask Elon, and I'm sure he'd come on.
I'm sure he would.
He's there with Dale.
Can you
Have you got
imagine
Ian's
it?
number?
He'll probably phone in, actually.
Okay, Richard.
I mean, I'm not sure that this is really the important thing. It seems to me pretty clear that Elon Musk likes to provoke people, and, maybe he did something that's plausibly deniable, but it was sure to send the right kind of message to the right kind of people as far as he was concerned. What matters to me much more is that Trump in the last 36 hours has given a pardon to the leader of the Proud Boys, who were an explicitly far-right anti-Semitic organisation, and he's had American neo-Nazis, come dine with him at Mar-a-Lago. I mean, that's what puts Jewish communities and ethnic minority communities around the world in danger. It's not kind of what hand gestures Elon Musk does. I think there's a broader point, though, that somebody like Elon Musk realises that there is enormous anger around the world, and indeed in parts of the kind of populist parts of the Republican Party, enormous anger around the world with people like him, making enormous amounts of money, in the case of something like SpaceX, making enormous amounts of money by extracting rents off the state. Of the state and taxpayers. And the only way that the political right can try to dampen down that anger with the super rich is by distracting them with racism and anti-migrant feeling a lot of the time. And we've seen where that goes historically, and we're seeing where it's going now.
Angela.
Can I be deeply unfashionable and come back to the question?
Okay. Feel free.
And I don't know if I am the only Jewish person on the panel, I am Jewish. I worked in Holocaust. I worked as a volunteer for a Holocaust memorial charity for over a decade, and during that time interviewed many survivors, and I'm involved with the second generation. Friends of mine are second generation. That is, they are the children of Holocaust survivors, and you see the impact as it bleeds down the generations. Believe me, now, at a time of spiralling anti-Semitism, deep, let's call it Jew hatred, actually, let's call it for what it is, rather than anti-Semitism, anti-Israel sentiment, which is sort of being used as the Trojan horse for anti-Semitism. Believe me, Jewish people, I can't speak for all 280,000 of us in this country, but many Jewish people I know are very deeply sensitive to what is and what does and doesn't constitute an anti-Semitic gesture. In my view, spooling back to Stephen's question, I think Elon Musk was one of two things. Either he was just the excitable boy in the playground. Wow, I'm here. I may be the richest man on the planet, but I am front and centre of this global event and this phenomena that is now, going to be here with us for another 4 years, unless he stands a third time. And so there may have just been a spur of the moment, there's a pun coming for these prices, gesture politics. You like it? No? Iain, you are such a poker player.
Well, I'm trying to work out how that's a pun.
Well, because he made a gesture and is it political?
I got it.
Okay, AC.
Okay. All right.
It was very good.
It was a cheap gag. It was a cheap gag.
Right.
So, okay, just to conclude, it was either literally he was so excitable that his hand sprung out in a way that was, or he is so incredibly clever that he did something supremely nuanced, which is all the things that Richard said about sending this kind of subliminal dog whistle gesture to those that know what I'm doing up, but actually I'll dress it up as something silly. Because would I be so stupid as to make this the point of conversation at the heart of the inauguration? If I was a betting man, I would say no, it wasn't, because I just don't. I think there are better ways to make that kind of level of conversation heard. I didn't feel offended by it, and believe me, there is an awful lot to be not only offended but feared by when you're Jewish.
I mean, to my mind, what you said, Anna, was the most important thing here. Where if you're saying "from my heart" and you're doing a hand gesture on your heart, and then what did he say after that?
My heart goes out to you, I think.
My heart goes out. So your hand gesture is out. Now, if I wanted to defend him, and I can't stand the man, but if I wanted to defend him, that would be the defence I would use. But he should have just come out today, instead of making all sorts of clever remarks about it, just said, no, it really wasn't.
Yeah.
He's not just
he's
enjoying the crack, though,
I think that's the problem, that he thinks that he's not accountable to anyone. He'll just act in a way
Well, he isn't, actually.
Well, yeah, but I mean, if you're going to try and have that level of influence on one of the most powerful countries on earth and try and influence other democracies as well, you do need to be accountable, actually, and it's why we need to have clearer regulations around
the bigger
funding
question
politics.
here, surely, is how can he allegedly is going to have an office in the West Wing? Now, imagine that was this country, and say, who's the most famous rich person in this country?
Paul McCartney.
Paul McCartney? No, a business person.
Paul McCartney's manager.
Let's say Alan. I don't know. Let's say Alan Sugar. If Alan Sugar was to have an office in Number 10. We would all expect him to resign from all of his business interests.
Absolutely.
To do that, as being a government advisor. I don't see any debate on this in the United States as to whether Elon Musk can actually be an advisor or have a role within government and still keep his position with Tesla and wherever.
But Iain, what I find extraordinary is that the day after such a significant event, any president being elected in the US is a significant event for the whole world. Why are we all talking about Elon Musk? Because actually,
Stephen asked about it.
Well, in that case, Stephen, obviously, you're entitled to ask your question and, we must answer it. But the broader point here, though, surely, is that he does like attention, and we are just playing into that and giving him more attention. It's not the most important thing.
In a moment, we'll have a question from Nikki in Tunbridge Wells, who's got a very substantial question. If I say the words drill and baby, you'll probably know where we're heading for the next question. But let's take an early break. It's 13 minutes past 8.
This is LBC.
Hey, Harry.
Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC.
Turn it off.
It's 8:15 on LBC. Anna Firth is busy turning her phone off because she is a broadcasting professional. And Adrian Ramsay is here, co-leader of the Green Party. He's behaving himself, as is Richard Power-Sayeed, political commentator, former Labour Party official, and Angela Epstein, journalist and broadcaster. Apparently, this is a really left-wing panel. I mean, where do you describe yourself on the political scale, Angela?
I'm centre-right. So how am I?
And Anna Firth, how would you describe yourself on the political spectrum?
Centre-right as well.
That in today's terms means that you're both lefties, apparently.
Well, here's the thing. I believe in marriage. I believe in a lot of traditional ideas. I mean, somebody in the supermarket stopped me once when I was with my kids, and she said, "Oh, are these all yours?" I said, "Yes, by the same father, and we got married first." She said, "Oh, put you in a museum."
Honestly, you're such a right-wing fascist,
Exactly,
Angela.
that's me.
Right, let's go to this WhatsApp question from Nikki in Tunbridge Wells. What do you think of drill, baby, drill? No restrictions on the environmental damage which is caused by American companies and the withdrawal of the US from the Paris Climate Accords. Richard.
I think the idea that Biden was some saint on clean energy and ending our dependence, or the US's dependence on fossil fuels, is a kind of mistake which makes people think that there's going to be some enormous shift with the Trump 47th presidency. Look, the fact is that under Biden, there continued to be enormous amounts of extraction of oil and gas in the US. He did a few things like limiting what could be done on federal land. He's tried to encourage people to buy electric vehicles, but it's not like the Green New Deal suddenly flowered underneath Biden. There's a bit of stimulating clean energy, but you know what? That's going to happen in any world economy because they want to compete with China. What do I think is going to happen under Trump? It's going to get a bit worse, but ultimately we're all going to shift to clean energy eventually, and it's just a question of whether we're going to buy it from China or whether we're going to make it ourselves.
Angela?
Well, look, I think, what was it Donald Trump that said the climate change and the climate crisis is a hoax? I think he once famously said. So I think withdrawing from the accord is not just about that. It's about the whole climate change orthodoxy. He just doesn't agree with it. He wants America to be self-sufficient. He wants it to produce record amounts of oil and gas. He wants to create jobs, and I think he doesn't see it in isolation. I think the worry is that if he sort of, in doing that, he incentivizes other countries who may not sort of cut their carbon emissions in the process because they think, well, if Americans can do this, then we can too. I mean, I think he taps into the zeitgeist a bit, because there are people, and I haven't got data to say how many, who bristle at this idea of being compelled towards a green agenda, who are being told they have to get rid of their diesel car soon, or are sold this idea that somehow if they go on an aeroplane they are going to destroy the planet, which is obviously the broader conversation about climate change and the impact that we're having on climate. So I think he understands that, but he wants America to be a manufacturing success, and he just doesn't buy and doesn't believe the whole green idea and the green agenda. And this was part of his rip up sort of a saga that went on today.
Adrian, I can feel you fizzing.
Fizzing and just almost despairing, but I say almost because we can't give up taking the action that's needed on the biggest issue of our time, climate and nature, being seriously at threat. But if we look at the wildfires, the hurricanes that the US, as much as anywhere, has suffered horrendously from in recent weeks and months, extreme floods around the world, climate change that we might have talked about 10, 20 years ago as a future issue is here. It's happening already. And even with the emissions that are locked in, it's going to get a lot worse. So anybody could look at this and just think, this is just deeply despairing. What are we going to do? And there are people who try and exploit that situation to say, well, actually, then, what's the point in taking any action at all? And that's not my view at all. Quite the opposite, actually, that it's all the more reason why we do need, firstly, global leaders to double down on the international action that the rest of the world can take. Trump, hopefully, will only be there for 4 years. We've got to mitigate the climate break down as much as we possibly can. But also, given that climate change is already around us, we've got to increasingly look at how prepared we are as countries and all the action we can take in this country to be as resilient as possible to the changes that are already happening. That will be a good thing for our citizens, whatever is happening elsewhere in the world.
Well, I think resilience always is. But just to address the point that Angela made about some people feel they're almost being dragooned by this agenda, that maybe the Green movement, political leaders have failed to persuade enough people that this is the predominant issue of our time.
Well, clearly we need to continue to make the case, but we've got to make the case for why climate action done in the right way is what's going to support the very poorest people in society. People like Trump, people like Reform in the UK will be pulling the rug from the very poorest in society if they fail to take the action that's needed to keep bills down, keep homes warm, tackle the underlying causes of why energy bills are going up and up.
No, but the very poorest in society are going to say to you, you want us to have these £11,000 heat pumps, you want us to pay £12,000 to have solar panels on our roofs. We can't afford that.
Well, absolutely, and that's why the Greens are first and foremost in saying government policies have got to be there in a way that enables everybody to benefit from these technologies and doesn't place the onus on the individual. That would not be the right thing to do. But if we're looking at the fairness aspect of it, one of the other big things in the news today is the government's support for a massive expansion of Heathrow Airport, which would completely bust any requirements that the Climate Change Committee has put in place for keeping carbon emissions in check.
We may come on to that later.
That is a fairness issue because 70% of the flights are taken by the richest 15%
we're coming on to
of people.
that later.
So my point is this is a fairness issue. If we tackle it, it's about supporting the poorest people in society.
Anna?
Yeah, so I think it's actually very regrettable because I do think that climate change is with us. I do think it's something that the whole world needs to grasp. And, we often forget that, of course, it was actually Margaret Thatcher who very first raised the whole issue of climate change being an important issue. But secondly...
1989.
Yeah, was it? Oh, I thought... Right, OK. Thought it was 80...
I've just written it in my book, so I know
87.
that. No.
But he's completely missing a trick here, I think, because actually all the economic growth is actually going to come from the green sector. So economically, I think he's missing a trick. I'm not in one sense, I'm not overly worried about it because what I think we're all forgetting is he's only going to be there for 4 years, and actually the chances of him getting new licences and getting new drilling done in that time is pretty,
But the
pretty
Republican
unlikely.
Party has shifted so far on this that, I mean, whoever stands for them at the following election in 2028, I mean, if they win, they're likely to be a sort of slight Trump clone, aren't they?
I'm not sure. I actually think that's a possibility. It's equally possible that the pendulum will swing back and anything that he does will be reversed. But I think looking at this from our point of view, he's obviously playing to his base, in a typical Trump fashion, and I don't particularly like the language either. But in terms of our interests as the UK, it's quite regrettable because in our country, we're only responsible, I think, for less than 1% of global emissions. It's absolutely piddling, and yet we are going down this massive green route. And I agree with what you were saying, Iain. We need countries like America and Saudi Arabia and China to be stepping up to the plate. We've done our bit. We've halved our emissions in the last 20 years. We have done really well. It's now time to stop impoverishing ourselves, and countries like the US should be stepping up.
But the only way that we have...
Go on, Ange.
Sorry, but there is a balance to be struck. I mean, yes, America is a huge emitter of greenhouse gases, and we have to make sure that we don't, kill off the planet or damage the planet. But equally, one of the strengths of Trump, one of the things I find compelling about Trump is the way he cuts through, and he speaks the language of ordinary people. There's a reason why so many different demographics voted for him. All those people who historically were completely repulsed by Trump, young men, young black men, Latino people, they all are now young women. They voted for him in their droves. And that's because somehow the message is cutting through. And people don't want to...
That doesn't make it right.
OK, there's a balance to be struck, as I said. And this compulsion to say you have to have an electric car, we haven't quite worked out what's going to happen to the huge the battery, which is incredibly expensive to replace, and we don't know how we're going to dispose of that in an ecologically friendly way. We'll worry about that soon, but we are telling you in a kind of dictatorial way what to do. I'm from the diesel generation when Gordon Brown told me to buy a diesel car because it was the...
Did you do everything Gordon Brown told you?
No, not so. That was probably the only thing Gordon Brown told me to do that I listened to. But, it was a matter of economics. I had a certain amount of money and they had offers on diesel cars. And I was, hey-ho, if it's good for the planet, why not? That turned out to be... not quite the case. But I think part of the reasons he's doing the ripping up stuff is because he wants to do everything that Joe Biden did or didn't do, and also because he wants to speak the language that the people want to hear. And I agree, it may, by the time these things all come to pass, it may not even be feasible to put them into action. But I think there's an element of sense in the terms of he's speaking the language of...
I agree with that.
I just want to say, you're totally right that when liberal green people have individualised this and said it's all the consumer's responsibility, it's a load of nonsense. It's businesses' responsibility. It's corporations' responsibility. It's the government's responsibility to deal with this.
But when individuals have no role at all?
Individuals can't have that much of an impact, quite frankly.
Of course we can. Why do we recycle then if we can't have an impact? What's the point of recycling?
Because collectively, eventually, we can have some kind of impact, but that's only happening because institutions, governments, are prodding us to doing it, indeed forcing us to do it. And so that's where I think actually the role of regulation very much does come in, because you can enforce collective action. We are looking at a world where oil and gas is getting so expensive so quickly. Our access to it is so insecure because globalization is collapsing and we're facing the threat of Russia. We need quickly to start exploiting the clean energy revolution so that we can be making money out of it, so that we can be selling those products. And right now we are just trundling towards a future where we have to buy those products from other countries. I think the Labour Party has made a fantastic start at moving us away from that ridiculous strategy that we saw under Rishi Sunak, but I'm afraid to say we need to move faster.
But then the government have got to get it right. I mean, we were one of the families that bought a diesel car when we were all told that diesel was the right thing to buy. And then, of course, we're then told, no, you can't have diesels anymore. They're completely the wrong thing to have. So it's all very well to say that it's all down to the government, but then they have got to get it right. And I look at what Sadiq Khan has done in London with the ULEZ charge. The people who have been affected by that have been the small traders who are driving older cars, who suddenly have got massive charges if they need to drive from outer London into London. People are being penalised who cannot afford these green levies, and that is a form of global elitism.
But Anna, you did refer earlier to the economic opportunities that there are with the green agenda, which there absolutely are. So why would we not be pressing ahead with all their opportunities that there are for job creation in renewable energy, in home insulation, in better public transport, in supporting our farmers to produce more of our food locally? These are the sorts of things that could create skilled, lasting jobs that will actually help tackle some of the discontent that's at the cause of why populists are winning support in the US and the UK because of decades of low wages and people not having satisfying careers. We need that green industrial revolution to really provide that stability, and also do so in a way where we're bringing down bills and making life easier and greener. It's got to be, as others have said, it's about the action that government takes to make it easier and cheaper for people to do the greener thing.
Would you agree it mustn't be on the back of the poorest in society? It's all very well if you're earning hundreds of thousands of pounds and you can afford a heat pump, and then if the heat pump doesn't...
Or an electric car.
And then if the heat pump's no good, you can probably afford to have a fan heater in the room as well. But normal people can't afford these things. Yeah. Why should they have to be bearing the brunt of these policies?
Yeah, absolutely. It's got to be done in a way where ordinary people can benefit from home insulation, from renewable energy. I mean, one of the things I've argued for repeatedly is that with insulating our homes, reducing bills, keeping our homes warm, we need to have a nationwide approach to that, where local authorities are empowered to support people, whether they're a private renter, a social renter or a homeowner, to benefit from home insulation. And that is about empowering everybody to make those benefits and not just leaving the onus on the individual.
I agree with that. There's a huge number of homes in our country that are not properly insulated.
Right, we're going to move on to other subjects in just a few moments' time here on Cross Question. 0345 6060 973 if you'd like to put your question to our panel. It's 8:30, news headlines with Daryl Jackson.
The former head of counter-terror policing has told LBC he doesn't believe changing terrorism laws will help to reduce attacks like the one in Southport. Neil Basu says violent people may not always leave a paper trail, allowing them to be apprehended. 4 people have been detained after a fire at a hotel at a popular skiing resort in Turkey killed at least 76 people. It broke out in the restaurant of the 12-storey building sat in the Curraglu Mountains. And police say they're treating the discovery of 2 bodies in West Lothian as unexplained. A 36-year-old man and 6-year-old girl were found dead at a house yesterday afternoon. LBC weather, patchy rain for central England and Wales tonight, drier elsewhere with some showers in the northwest and a low of -2.
LBC. People. Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
8:33 on LBC. On the panel tonight, we have Anna Firth, a former Conservative MP, Richard Power-Sayeed, political commentator, former Labour Party official, Angela Epstein, journalist and broadcaster, and Adrian Ramsay, co-leader of the Green Party of England and Wales and MP for Waveney Valley. How's being an MP? Is it what you thought it would be, Adrian?
Well,
what's the best thing and the worst thing?
What's the best? Well, I'm most at home when I'm in the constituency, I have to say. I love representing my residents in Waveney Valley, being out and about, meeting community groups, taking up issues that people really care about and highlighting really good examples that are happening on things like nature restoration and flood alleviation, for example. I'm getting used to being in Westminster, and obviously if I have a chance to champion a really important issue, that's great. But some of the processes, you hear that it's a bit arcane, but it really is. And I'm seeing Anna nodding. It takes a lot of getting used to.
And are people, I mean, you've had 4 MPs, or
yes.
Is it 4? Are MPs from other parties, are they friendly to you?
Yes, overall. I mean, there's a huge number of new MPs. Over half the MPs are new, and there was a very collegiate atmosphere amongst all the new MPs of all parties when we were doing the induction together early on. I think as time's gone on, people have got into their party circles, and you see the whips in heavy operation.
You were lucky to have an induction.
Yeah. But at the same time, on a one-to-one level, especially on local issues and where you've got a particular shared interest with another MP, you can build relationships. The question is whether you can overcome the whip system to make progress on things that where there is sensible support.
Right, let's go to a WhatsApp question from Vaz in Warwick. Is the PREVENT programme fit for purpose? And what would be a better solution to tackle extremism in the UK? Anna, you have some views on this, I think.
Yeah, so the honest truth is that I don't believe the PREVENT programme is fit for purpose. And of course, I come at this from a particular perspective because I took over from Sir David Amess, who was tragically, barbarically murdered by an Islamic extremist who had been referred to PREVENT and who had been interviewed on 2 occasions by PREVENT, and they had not thought there was any problem with him whatsoever. And it all came out, of course, at the trial that he had gone online, he had read up on the sort of questions he'd be asked in these interviews and the answers which he needed to give to mean that, nothing happened. And, I raised, of course, this is something which I raised in Parliament. And of course, there's been the Shawcross Review, and one of the things that the Shawcross Review has pointed out is that the biggest threat, 67% since 2018 of terror attacks were related to Islamic extremism and occupying a fifth of the MI5 workload. But when you look at the PREVENT referrals, only 13% of the people referred to PREVENT were in any way related to Islamic extremism. So there's, of course, there's 2 ways you can look at that, but Shawcross's conclusion was that the PREVENT programme was not focused sharply enough on the people that it needed to be. So that's the first thing. But the second thing is that when people have been engaged by the programme is not working. And I actually think that it's quite insulting to the Amos family that Keir Starmer has said that there's a line in the sand today. My heart absolutely goes out to the families who've lost these gorgeous little girls, and of course I think there should be a public inquiry. But we have had, before that, we had the death of Sir David Amess. Before that, we had the stabbing in Streatham. Before that, we had the London Bridge stabbing. Before that, we had the Parsons Green tube train attempted bombing, and all of those attackers were lone wolves. All of those had been referred to the PREVENT programme. In all of those cases, the PREVENT programme had failed.
But we know that because those attacks happened and the information came out. But we don't know how many tens, dozens, thousands of people who have gone through the PREVENT programme and therefore haven't carried out any attacks. So it's very easy to pick out the tragic circumstances that we both know about.
Absolutely. And I tried to look up before coming up tonight how many people they estimate, how many terror attacks they estimate had actually been prevented. And of course, how do you prove a negative? I didn't actually find that figure.
Well, MI5
either.
will tell you that, that there are dozens that they have prevented.
Sure.
They did. I think
Ian,
the number 43 comes to mind,
Ian,
but that may be wrong.
That's a slightly different point, because in each of these examples which I've given you, 5 examples, and now we have had the Southport stabbing as well. In all of those cases, the killers had been referred to PREVENT and engaged by PREVENT. So PREVENT does not work. And
in those cases, I'm saying that it may work in other cases.
But for all of those cases, there is a family or families who have suffered the most horrendous tragedy, including the Amos family. And I think this inquiry must be expanded to include those other cases as well. Why should the Southport stabbing be different when we've got all these other instances of similar events?
You were listening earlier to my interview with Katie Amos, David Amos's daughter. She thinks that her family have been treated appallingly by the system, by politicians, by the system of government. She wants the inquest to be resumed. I think she would like a similar sort of inquiry to what's happening in Southport. Why hasn't the government, whether it was the previous Conservative government or this government, why won't they engage with the Amos family? Because I know you've been putting pressure on them to do so.
Well, I mean, I can only comment on what I did after I became the MP. And as soon as it became clear to me that we didn't have all the answers, I used every opportunity I had to, I petitioned the Prime Minister, I petitioned the Prime Minister's PPS.
You're quite an adept campaigner when you put your teeth into something, aren't you?
I petitioned the Home Secretary, I petitioned the party chairman, and, I was very clear that, there are more questions that need to be asked and answered.
Adrian.
Yes, so I have some experience of the Prevent programme in practice, in that I used to be Chief Executive of a higher education institution, and of course all further and higher education institutions have to oversee the Prevent programme. But I think I want to mainly comment on it from a similar perspective to Anna, in terms of the cases, the horrific cases, whether it's David Amos or whether it's the absolute tragedies in Southport, where Prevent hasn't met its own objectives. It hasn't delivered. And of course, it's only one of 4 strands of the anti-terrorism work. The counter-terrorism forces work on protect, prepare and pursue as well. So we shouldn't just think about Prevent. But in relation to Prevent, because it acts on people's gut feelings of often teachers or educational personnel to refer people, what it can do is have a lot of biases in the system in the types of people that get referred. And people talk about racial profiling, for example. But also, if you look at the number of autistic people who are referred, they make up 12% of referrals, despite the fact that they represent only 1% of the population, which suggests something is going awry here in terms of people's perceptions of where a risk is and how it operates. So, I'm not coming here to be sensationalist about it. I think that the government needs to take a calm look at what is actually effective and what can be learnt, as I hope there will be in the Southport inquiry, from examples of this clearly failing.
Angela.
Well, look, Ruda Cabana, who carried out these terrible atrocities in Southport, just down the road to me, a very benign seaside town that I know well, which I seem to sort of compound the horror because it was so utterly unexpected, if we are to expect these things anywhere. I think we need to go back and look at the individual, because this is obviously what's triggered this particular conversation. He wasn't a Muslim. He wasn't an asylum seeker. We know that the riots kick-started because there was a vacuum in terms of information and people made assumptions and they joined the dots. He wasn't somebody who wanted to topple a government. He wasn't somebody who was out to decimate a particular ethnic group. He was obsessed with killing. He wanted to kill. He wanted to maim. He was absolutely drunk on the horrors of what he could find online in order to fulfill that terrible inclination that he had. He was referred 3 times to Prevent. Now, I'm not knowledgeable on the workings in Prevent in the way my 2 learned colleagues are here, but the fact was that he was known to multiple authorities, and he kept coming up again and again and again. And call me terribly simplistic, but 1 for the money, 2 for the show. For somebody to be referred 3 times and not be adequately monitored, and for there not to be some kind of multidisciplinary team that talk to each other and say whether or not he doesn't fill the template of having a particular ideology, he doesn't subscribe to a particular set of heinous ideals. The fact is that he kept coming up on the radar of the police, of the mental health authorities, and of course Prevent. How many times, however much you package and repackage Prevent, how much you kick the can down the road with another government inquiry, how many times Starmer stands up and says lessons will be learned and he won't leave any stone unturned, and he pulls out every cliche he's got in his bag in order to say that he'll do the right thing by this. It always comes down to the same thing when they talk about lessons will be learned, which is over and over again somebody passes through the system and they are overlooked. So there will always be people who are aberrations of the human condition, whether it's because they're part of an ideology or because they've seen stuff or they're just born bad. Whatever it is, the fact is they can do terrible harm to other people, as we saw in Southport and all the other cases that have been mentioned. And for some reason, the brakes are not being applied. So whether you want to change Prevent's remit, whether you want to restart it, repackage it, it won't amount to a hill of beans if again and again people come across their kind of landscape, their radar, whatever you want to call it, and it is ignored. that is the epitome of it. The fact that these things are ignored.
Richard.
I guess I want to come back to this idea that somehow Prevent has not been sufficiently aggressive towards Muslim communities, or at least towards Islamists. As we've just heard, I think very elegantly outlined, the terrible murders that happened in Southport were not to do with Islamist ideology, or rather they were to do with a terrifying mishmash of incoherent ideas. And the idea that Prevent has not been targeting Islamists adequately, I think, will come as quite a surprise to a lot of Muslim communities who have experienced the most pernicious and aggressive kinds of targeting. Children violently pulled from their beds, children violently pulled from their schools. I think of the little boy who was asked with something like kind of, what do you want for as a New Year's present or something like that, or what do you want for Christmas? And he said, I want to give alms to the oppressed. Alms, ALMS, as in the traditional word, which clearly his...
How would he even know that word?
Well, because he's a clever little boy. And his teacher didn't know that word. His teacher had a poorer vocabulary than the child and assumed that he was saying alms, ARMS. And this little boy was dragged into a Prevent interview. Like, that's the kind of nonsense that's been going on. So I think we need to be... I would also point out that the Shawcross report was written by somebody with a terrifying political axe to grind. There are lots of different...
He happened to be on the right. How terrible.
I think he has a pretty bad reputation for saying rather nasty things about Muslims, if memory serves.
Well, I mean, I'm just quoting from his report that 67% of attacks since 2018 has an Islam terrorist connection, and they accounted for, I got it wrong, I said a quarter, I think, of MI5's workload. No, it's 3/4 of MI5's caseload.
But we're missing the point. Respectfully, we are missing the point here. Yes, there may well be, and there are. Empirically, it's proven there are certain demographics where a greater number of terrorist atrocities occur as a consequence of certain groups. He downloaded an Al-Qaeda training manual. Al-Qaeda, we know where their ideology comes from. As Richard said, it was a mishmash. That all may be true, whether it's 60%, 80% or 2%. The fact is that Prevent deals with people on a case-by-case basis, because and if they are unable to assess their risk based on who is sitting on the chair in front of them, and he can simply learn what he needs to say in terms of answers.
And there's another point that I think is really important, Iain. From the Prevent referrals for 23 to 24, 40% of the referrals, so nearly 3,000 referrals, were aged 11 to 15. 11 to 15. So what I think this says to us is there's going to have to be engagement with the parents as well as with the children. And I don't think we're going to solve this until we actually have a whole family approach.
I agree.
Right, thanks for all of your answers on that. Don't forget, in about 10 minutes' time, our panel will answer our fun question of the day, and they're all really looking forward to it. It's 8:48.
LBC. People Cross Question with Iain Dale on LBC. Text 84850.
Adrian, Ramsay, Angela Epstein, Richard Power-Sayeed and Anna Firth still with us answering your questions. Paul is in Bolton. Hello, Paul.
Hello, everybody. We're 24 hours into Donald Trump's presidency, and it's no surprise that already he's trying to make it much harder for non-binary and trans people in America. So do the panel agree with me that it's time for the UK to offer safe asylum for trans, non-binary and that people, and also for MPs to set up an immigration scheme so vulnerable trans and non-binary Americans can move to the UK. And also, just because Donald Trump is anti-trans, do the panel agree with me that trans people and non-binary people will always exist? Because let's not forget, April Ashley, Julia Grant, they're no longer with us, but they were many years ago.
Well, there's a lot to unpack there. We haven't got a lot of time, so maybe pick out one of those aspects, Richard.
Trans and non-binary people have existed in all societies and all cultures and all civilizations, and of course they should be protected and they should be celebrated. I don't know if the government's going to do anything nearly so antagonistic towards Trump's presidency as is being suggested, but I'd like to see them defend as many trans and non-binary people as they can.
Angela?
Britain has a fine history of offering sanctuary for those who are in genuine need and need to escape persecution, and I think that should always be the case, but they need to come here by legal means. And if there is a case to be made about needing to come because you are in fear of your life, then that's fine. I think to have some broad brush policy is not the way forward.
Angela? No. Anna. Confusing me.
I don't think that we should be offering asylum to transgender people from the USA, because I don't think that they are, and I very much hope that they are not going to be persecuted. And I think that this was the sort of comment which I just think is unnecessarily divisive. But what I think Trump was driving at, and where I do completely agree with him, is I think we have gone completely woke mad in this country, and we diversity, inclusion, equality. These are things that we believe in, but I just don't think that we should be forcing these things on every institution, on every email, and every public service. And in him saying that he wants to get rid of all diversity, inclusion, equality officers, I 100% agree with him.
Adrian?
It's easy to say that, but we have to recognise that there are so many people in society. If you look at, for example, Muslim groups who we were just talking about, LGBT people, women who are underrepresented in so many sectors. The gender pay gap is still there. So there are very good reasons for having diversity officers. And Trump's rhetoric on whether it's on migration or on trans people is deeply worrying, because it's sowing seeds of hatred, and global leaders need to stand up to that.
Well, you were all admirably brief, which means we can get to Robbie in Chelmsford WhatsApp's question. He says, should the government back a third runway at Heathrow to help economic growth, even if it goes against their environmental goals? Now, the background to this, along with a third runway at Heathrow, the government is also considering approving the building of a second runway at Gatwick and a new terminal at Luton as part of Chancellor Rachel Reeves's plans to boost economic growth. This evening, it's been reported that the London Mayor, Sir Sadiq Khan, still sounds odd saying that, doesn't it? Plans to oppose any expansion of Heathrow. I can remember organising conferences on runways at Heathrow and Gatwick in 1992, and here we are in 2024. Adrian?
This is deeply reckless. We've already talked today about how climate change, climate breakdown is here. It's the biggest challenge we face. And we need to look at what the Independent Climate Change Committee is saying about the level of passenger numbers, passenger growth that is manageable whilst meeting the government's own net zero targets. What they said is if you no more than a 25% growth in passenger numbers from 2018 levels, that would take you to 370 million. The Heathrow expansion alone would bust that out of the water, and they're talking about substantial growth at Gatwick and Luton as well. The numbers just don't add up. We've got to have carbon
Well, they do
budgeting.
if you're a pro-growth government, don't they? And that's Rachel Reeves's main driver to create economic growth.
But look, if a government minister sat here and said, these are all the things that we're going to do and we can't tell you how we're going to afford it, you would say your numbers don't add up. And if they're saying, well, we're going to reach net zero carbon emissions, but we're going to do all these activities that actually go way beyond that in terms of emissions, you would start challenging them, Iain, and rightly so. We need to have numbers on climate that add up, just like on budgets. And this is a fairness issue, because 70% of flights are made by the wealthiest 15% of people. So this is about ensuring that the very richest people are not making life harder for everyone else.
Interesting use of statistics there. When you say the richest 15%, that 15%, I mean, that covers people on relatively ordinary incomes.
But the point is that the levels of, most people would not recognise that statement, Iain, in terms of the levels of income that we'll be talking about. But the point is, if we're going to stay within remotely safe levels of warming, and we're already talking about climate breakdown happening all around us, if we're going to mitigate the worst effects of climate breakdown, we cannot afford to have substantial aviation growth. It's as simple as
Angela.
that.
Oh, I think we definitely need it. The thing is, there's no equivalent bike lane when you want to go abroad. And they say, don't use your car, use your bike. You can't do that when you want to go to the continent or America or further afield. You have to get on an aeroplane. And if we are going to, if growth is going to be the way that we are going to have this great economic recovery, we're going to attract investment, then we need people to be able to move to and from the country. We need to be able to move goods around. We need to be able to, and it will create jobs, which again will energise the economy. My only issue with this announcement is they're all southern-based airports. I come from Manchester and still live in Manchester, and we have Manchester Airport, which is consistently voted as one of the worst airports in the country.
Well, that's why nobody wants to go there.
Exactly.
Then, isn't it?
So we need to improve it. We need to improve the.
What's that got to do with another runway at Heathrow?
Because we need to have other runways in other airports to make.
Well, we clearly don't. There's no demand for them.
No, because places other than Manchester. I think you're playing with me, Iain.
I am, but I think I'm making a valid point.
You're making a valid point in the sense that if you don't have competition, you don't get better. You then lapse into complacency, and that's what's happened with Manchester. We need to invest in other northern airports. The airlines want to go
to Heathrow. They don't want to go to Gatwick particularly. They don't want to go to Stansted. They don't want to go to Luton. They want to go to Heathrow. So that's why there is a demand for another runway there. Personally, I think we should have built another runway in the middle of the Thames estuary, but that's another reason, another debate. Richard?
It certainly is another debate. Look, Rachel Reeves is doing a fantastic job of attracting growth to this country. Her and Jonathan Reynolds and Peter Kyle last week confirmed last week confirmed 16 billion quid private investment into this country for AI. That's just after the Global Investment Summit, where they got 25 billion. That's an additional 25 billion for data center infrastructures. She's doing a great job. She doesn't need to do this tiny little piddling thing for which there is a very, very thin business case of extra runways.
If it's so tiny, why would you be concerned about
it? I'll just finish this. I'll just finish this. Long term, the number or the proportion of business travellers is down compared to leisure travellers. Leisure travellers, there's far more people going out of the country on planes to take their holidays than there are people coming into the country. So we're literally going to
Well, that can't be true, because the same people that go out have to come back in.
No. For their holidays. So they go spend their holiday cash in other countries, and then they come back home. And they don't spend their holiday cash here. If you're literally building capacity for them to go spend their money somewhere else, it's going to be bad for growth.
But we also need capacity for people to come here, and London in particular is a massive destination for foreign
My
tourists.
point is that it's a smaller proportion than those who are going out. So the leisure argument doesn't work, and the business argument doesn't work. The business travel argument doesn't work either.
We get more people coming to London than any other place in Europe apart from Paris.
Look, it's just a fact that if you go talk to business travellers, British business travellers, they were polled by YouGov fairly recently. They said we don't need more than half said we don't need to travel nearly so much now because of Zoom. They said we want rail to be on an equal footing tax-wise with aviation, and they said we want. A majority said that they want jet fuel to be taxed fairly.
The railways get subsidised to the tune of billions of pounds a year. The aviation industry doesn't.
They do, because they don't have any because they don't have any tax on jet
What a
fuel.
shame we've run out of time. We have to go to our fun question.
Oh, okay.
No. It's from Janice in St Helens. A new TV drama series will feature Succession's Harriet Walter as Margaret Thatcher and Steve Coogan as the Labour MP turned broadcaster Brian Walden, and depict his famous interview with her in 1989. Remember that one where he said, "You're off your trolley, Prime Minister." You're too young, Richard. Who would you like to play you in a TV show?
Shall I go?
Because apparently Corey tells me I didn't let you speak on Heathrow.
You didn't.
So I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to.
You didn't.
Go on, 30 seconds then, because we really are running out of time.
Can I not talk about Rachel from Accounts' homework? We've just heard about what brilliant growth she delivered from Richard. What was her brilliant growth in September? 0. What was it in October? 0. What was it in November? 0.1%. She got 0, 0, and then 1 out of 1,000.
They've only been in power 6 months.
Come on, you cannot say that. That is useless.
Had 14 years to build that.
Do you want to say anything about Heathrow?
So about Heathrow, we need to look at Southend. We need to look at London Southend Airport. That's an airport which could take more capacity, and that's an airport which we should invest in. Yes, we do need. Of course, if we're serious about going for growth, we need more air capacity. But this isn't a government that's serious about going for growth, because if it was, it wouldn't be punishing small businesses.
Little known fact, I used to work for London Southend Airport. Anyway, who would you like to play you in
I'm trying to think of someone really
You've
sort
had
of
10
powerful.
minutes.
I know, but all I can. We love all the Julia Roberts films. Notting Hill, Pretty Woman. I think she's a beautiful actress, and I'd be delighted if she was depicting me.
Adrian.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing that Steve Coogan film, and we know that he has a way of playing people from Norfolk, but I perhaps shouldn't choose that. I think I'd go for Cillian Murphy.
Ooh, good cheekbones.
I don't even know who this is.
Who's from
Oppenheimer.
From Oppenheimer. Oh.
I haven't seen it. Richard.
When I occasionally go on the television, people sometimes make fun of these quite huge eyebrows and the way that they move around rather a lot. So I thought I would go with somebody else who had fantastic, magnificent eyebrows that moved around a lot, the late, great Anthony Sher.
I thought you said Dennis Healy.
Oh, yeah, Roger Moore too. Both of them.
Okay, Angela.
I was going to say Meryl Streep, just because that way I'd definitely get an Oscar to remember me by. But I love Emily Blunt, especially from The Devil Wears Prada, because she was so sassy and so lippy. A little bit of Julia Roberts too because of the hair, but probably Emily Blunt.
And I, of course, would get Mick Lynch to play me. Or the Archbishop of York, or maybe not in current circumstances. Right, thank you all very much indeed for coming on tonight. Tomorrow's panel includes the former Conservative Culture Secretary Lucy Fraser, the Independent peer Baroness Claire Fox, and the Financial Times political columnist Stephen Bush. Coming up in the next hour, we're going to return to the subject of the new president in America. Now, I had a conversation with Corey yesterday where I said, I know I shouldn't say this, but I'm actually a little bit excited about a Trump presidency, even though I would never have voted for him in a month of Sundays. I do feel dirty for saying it, but I think, Anna's just spat out her coffee, I think that I'm probably in the majority here, that even people who can't stand Donald Trump, who disagree with everything he says, think it's going to be quite exciting over the next 4 years. Do you feel dirty too? I haven't asked that as a question on the programme before. 0345 6060 973.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom, the Home Secretary Yvette Cooper says it's unbearable thinking the man behind the Southport attack could have been stopped.
He stands responsible for one of the most barbaric crimes in our country's history. The most vile and cowardly attack on little children who could never defend themselves.
The government has announced a public